But thank you all for coming, and without any further ado, Sir Charles. Oh, Dr. J.
I was talking to my brother Chris over there about his hat. Random acts of fashion. That's what he's got, because he had a different hat on last night. I've got my own random act of fashion tonight. This was given to me, this shirt here, was given to me by one of my board of directors who lives in Chillicothe, Ohio. And it says here, Freud is dead, Marx is dead, and Darwin isn't feeling very well. And the icons of humanism, the leaders of humanism. So that's why I'm wearing this shirt, actually, because it's in the spirit of what we talked about last night and what we're going to talk about tonight. I do like what Ron was talking about a little while ago. He said that, made that quote of there's three kinds of truth: your truth, my truth, and the truth. That's very interesting, and it's very relevant to everything we're talking about. The philosophy of science. I was talking to Danielle. Where are you still here, Danielle? About she said, well, it's hard to keep the Christianity and learn the science with Christianity in mind. And I said, well, now be careful not to do this Christianity and science thing, because science is truth. Evolution isn't science. Don't equate evolutionary thinking with science. Evolution is a philosophy. It's evolutionism, as Ron was saying to us. And how many of you heard that this year we decided Pluto is not a planet? How many of you heard that? Yes. Pluto has been demoted to like planetesimal, planetoid, or asteroid. There, you know all about that, don't you? Yeah. Well, you know what? Pluto doesn't care. It just, that's 40 times the distance away from the sun that we are. It's way, way far out there. And, Pluto is just, I probably haven't heard about it. Pluto has just gone on like it always has and really doesn't care. And when we argue about the nature of the universe and the origin of the universe and all the meaning and the truth and how the world got started and how life got started and how the universe got started and what happened at the Big Bang, you know what? All of that is history. It's historical. There is a way that it all happened, and it doesn't change just because someone's winning an argument here, sitting on a park bench or debating in a college campus or something like that. Science's job is to discover what happened, not to prove your theories are true. That's sociology, that's philosophy, that's psychology, and it's not science. Science is the search for the truth, the effort to understand the world. That's what Linus Pauling said, two-time Nobel Prize winner, and unlike Al Gore, he won a Nobel Prize in science. Okay, Al Gore won an Oscar and the Nobel Peace Prize. An Oscar is not for science, that's for showmanship, acting. Yes, he was a good actor. Well, okay, let's go on with what we want to do. Last night we talked about the death of Darwinism this year, and I told you that I was going to talk about tonight the new Darwinism. What new little thing the evolutionists are going to cook up and dish out of their pot of stew of philosophical apologetics for their failing, doomed theory. I usually do this presentation in one part, but we're doing it in two parts, so I'm able to elaborate and reiterate a few things tonight that I mentioned yesterday, and also bring out some more details about. And please remember that I'm going to show you a bunch of things that's happening as evolutionists are trying to crank out a new theory, but what happens in the future, what happens beyond what I report to you, I will guess about, and I will give you my guesses and what other creationists are saying about it, and even what evolutionists are saying about it, but no one really knows what they're going to do next. And so what my prognostications come out, I'm not responsible for it. I'm not claiming any gift of being able to know what they're about to do. I do claim a gift from God and being able to give an answer to any man that asks a reason for the hope that is within me, and so they can't win debates. No way. Okay, yes, I mentioned last night, Here Lies Old Earth Evolution, March 25th, 2005, rest in peace. That's talking about the soft tissues found in dinosaurs, mastodons, the moa, the maiasaur, and the triceratops, the T-Rex, the Santanoraptor, all those different kinds of things. And that, of course, is a problem for evolutionists. And they're still reeling from the effects of that discovery 2 years ago with no acceptable answers. But there's much, much more that is causing them consternation. Much, much more that's giving them terrible problems and causing them to have to find a new paradigm. We'll talk about what that's basically a lens through which you see everything. It's basically, in the scientific world, it's the equivalent of the term worldview, which Ron went over a great deal yesterday, and so did Dr. Sharp on the videos. Next. This is Marcus Ross, a professor at Liberty University. Marcus made the New York Times this year for getting his doctoral degree from University of Rhode Island, and he's a creationist. I've known Marcus by email for over 10 years. When he was the Penn State Origins Club president as an undergrad, he used to get my emails, and actually I used to send my emails under a pseudonym so that I wouldn't get fired from the college where I was teaching, and he would send them all out and distribute them from Penn State so that those email return address didn't come back to me where I was teaching at the time. I ended up being denied tenure anyway, but that's another story. But Marcus then went to Dakota School of Mines and got his master's. Now he's a Dr. Ross. And when he got his doctoral degree from University of Rhode Island, the New York Times picked up that, and it was a big old fiasco because a creationist got a doctoral degree. Well, so did I. Lots of us have doctoral degrees. But next, this woman here, Eugenie Scott, it's such a shame. She looks like a nice person, but Dr. Scott is the executive director of the National Center for Science Education, Incorporated, a private, basically hate creation group in their credo and their statement of purpose there to keep evolution going and keep creation out of the public schools. Dr. Scott commented and said she would never accept a creationist into a doctoral degree program because it would just take too much time to re-educate them, to unbrainwash them and stuff like that. And another professor in Texas said, creationists shouldn't be able to become scientists, which made a professor in Kansas, who was one of the crafters of the pro-evolution Kansas State Board of Education standards, made him say, that's frightening to think that, even though I'm not a creationist, that's frightening that someone would say something like that. Science is for everyone and ought to be. Well, Dr. Scott was very, very, upset about the fact that Marcus got his doctoral degree. Next, but there's more things like this that continue to go on. Look what this guy here says. This is the open-minded university professor mindset we usually hear espoused. Look, our society should be an open society, willing to accept and embrace diversity. I'd like to see more tolerance and open-mindedness in our country. Next. So you accept that I'm a born-again, Bible-believing, literal six-day creationist? Next. Get out and stay out. There's the hypocrisy. You see, all things considered except one. You see, that's the way it goes. Next. This man, Richard von Sternberg, has 2 doctoral degrees in evolution-related subject areas. He was doing research at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., working as an employee of the National Institutes of Health in Maryland, And he was also, a couple of years ago, editor of a small geology journal that came out of the Smithsonian. But he did the unforgivable in the sight of the evolutionist community. He allowed a creationist, well, actually an intelligent design theorist, Stephen Meyer, to publish a paper in that journal. It was peer-reviewed by three experts in the field. They did find problems, but Dr. Sternberg said, I think that even though there were some problems in the paper, we ought to bring up this discussion in the literature because it's being discussed in circles in the scientific community anyway. Well, you'd have thought that he allowed some kind of, endorsement of Nazi concentration camps or something, because the entire evolutionist community, the ACLU, the National Center for Science Education, Eugenie Scott and her whole crew came down on him like thunder. Then phone calls from the Smithsonian were going every day to National Institutes of Health calling for his resignation. Dr. Sternberg is going to be featured in the new movie Expelled that's coming out. Go to the website www.expelledthemovie.com, and you'll see on Darwin's birthday in February, that movie is going to be coming out, and it's going to be showcasing the idea that in higher academia, if you don't follow the Darwinist party line, you're out. I ought to know. It happened to me. Happened to Dr. Sternberg. They crucified their own. He was banned from using the collections at the Smithsonian Museum, and so could not continue his research. He ended up going on CNN and saying, look, the word on the street is that creationists are always censoring people. What really happened was I was censored by my own fellows, the evolutionists, and now he's an intelligent design theorist himself. He has come over to our side because of how he was treated. Well, anyway, that's Dr. Sternberg's story. This is an article from the New York Times just this June. Look at what's happening. Darwin still rules, but some biologists dream of a paradigm shift. Remember what I said? A paradigm is a lens through which you see everything. Of course, all new data that comes in science, I interpret through the lens of creation science. I have a creationary paradigm. They have an evolutionary paradigm, but they're about to shift the entire nature of the way evolution is. Look. A major revision to Darwin could change an intellectual zeitgeist, or spirit of the time, more than half a century old. You see, they're about to have a big shift. Now, so I'm not making this stuff up to you. They really are in so much trouble, even they are realizing, guys, we got to do some fancy footwork, and quick, because the whole ship is sinking. Next. Well, here's the way, and I mentioned this, I showed you this last night, here's the way that the evolutionary tree of life, or our ancestors, our family tree, with all the missing links, showed up in 2002. Ian Tattersall is a well-known expert on Neanderthals. All the way back to the Sahelanthropus chadensis, found in 2002 in Chad, and the Ardipithecus ramidus, Ardipithecus cadava, Auroran tuganensis, all supposed to be really in the same genus. And then since Milford Wolpoff and the Washington Post and many other researchers say that chadensis was really just a monkey and didn't have anything to do with us, that would knock all of them out if they're all in the same genus. The Australopithecus afarensis, the famous Lucy fossil right in the middle there. And then right after it, Australopithecus africanus, a million years later, according to their dating systems. And yet, after a million years, it unevolved. It actually, evolution went backwards and it became more like a chimp. And that was their story. Yeah, it appears to be in the wrong part of the fossil record, or at least it appears that it did exactly the opposite thing that evolution should do. But that's okay. Evolution just went backwards for a million years, that's all, so no problem, you see. And then the Homo habilis, or handyman, which they have now found in the same layer as Homo erectus. They used to think habilis turned into erectus, and erectus turned into us. And just this August, they found these two in about the same date, same layer, so they realized they were the same, or at least lived at the same time, so one couldn't have evolved into the other one. And Homo ergaster, National Geographic said in 1997, was the same thing as Homo erectus. So we couldn't have evolved from that either. And Heidelbergensis and Antecessor are really the only missing links on this chart that haven't been disqualified from being in our direct lineage, and those are probably going since the other ones have gone. Homo neanderthalensis, everyone realizes now that Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals were people. And so we don't talk about them as being missing links anymore, even if you're an evolutionist. This is just the kind of thing that's happening to them, and why they're getting so desperate that they've realized they've got to change their story quick, because we creationists are making mincemeat out of them in public because of the silly things they're saying. Next. Well, now here's Dr. Donald Johanson, who in 1974 discovered the Lucy fossil. He said, nobody really places a great deal of faith in any human phylogenetic tree or human evolutionary story of life tree. He said this in 1995, 20 years after he discovered the Lucy fossil. So even he thinks that these things are not real stories. Next. This is a prognostication by evolutionists of what might have happened if the dinosaurs never went extinct. After all, according to evolution, they were the ruling species. Reptiles, the age of reptiles, the Jurassic, the Mesozoic. If the dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct, they would have evolved to be the most intelligent ruling species. Instead, we did, because we evolved from rats. But here's what they said. Your might have beens. We might have actually been lizard people. After National Geographic came out with this interesting article about what if the dinosaurs never had gone extinct, I did see this very same picture in the grocery store on the front of the National Enquirer while I was buying groceries saying, lizard people found in the Amazon. They'll do. I don't blame National Geographic for that. Even Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist who wrote the book The God Delusion, The Selfish Gene, he actually has said that, and The Blind Watchmaker, he said, look, any evolutionist who's foolish enough to actually guess where evolution is going to go next, it isn't worth their salt. And so, but guessing is silly. But anyway, this is what they thought might happen. Next. Here's that Time magazine we were talking about a little bit yesterday, October 9th of 2006, not long ago. Let's check a little bit of the stuff here, and I'm going to show you one of their favorite things in the past 2 decades that is now failing them and falling apart in front of their eyes, and that is the DNA testing. Next. Dr. Owen Lovejoy, who is the head of the anthropology department at Kent State, said in this article in Time magazine of October of 2006, he said, it says, Lovejoy is more dismissive about claims that ancestors of chimps and humans interbred, arguing that using mutation rates in the genome to time evolutionary changes is extraordinarily imprecise. Using mutation rates in the genome to time evolutionary changes is extraordinarily imprecise. I'll explain a little bit of what Dr. Lovejoy and the other evolutionists are talking about when they talk about using mutations to time evolutionary history events. Next. Here is this article that we looked at yesterday from the Washington Post, but I want to zero in on something, a different aspect of it tonight. It's mentioning, there's the Sahelanthropus chadensis, just a year ago in the Washington Post, the 7-million-year-old Tamai skull unearthed in Chad in 2001 may have belonged to a line of non-hybrids that were not human ancestors. Now, the evolutionists began to think, well, the missing links aren't showing up and we're having all these troubles and we can't prove that mutations actually make things better, so maybe evolution proceeded by hybrids instead. They've started pointing to things like the liger. Yes, Napoleon Dynamite was right. There's such a thing as a liger, a lion tiger. And also, you take a horse and a donkey, you get a mule, and there's the kama, the camel llama. Poor thing, there's only one of them in the world and doesn't have a girlfriend, But, we can do these hybridizations, and evolutionists are now starting to say, well, hybridization then was the way. Not mutation, but hybridization may have been the way that evolution got us to where we are. And of course, they're saying here that hybrids between chimps and humans breeding like 4 million years ago, that's what made us. You see, humans and chimps split apart for about 1 million years, and some sources said 4 million years, and then they started breeding again, and that's how we came about, by monkeys and real people mating. And so we're just these hybrids. Now, let me explain how this method works. It says right here, this is the conclusion, this mating with chimps, a group of scientists has reached using a comparison of the genes of humans and their closest animal relatives to sketch a picture of human origins far more detailed than what fossil bones have revealed. You see, You've probably heard that monkey DNA and human DNA is very, very similar. Well, so is human DNA is very similar to even the nematode worm, a 1/10 of a millimeter long worm whose entire body is only made of 1,000 cells. Your body is made of 100 trillion cells. Some of you are smaller than others, maybe 20 trillion cells, depends on who you are and how big you are. These things are so small, but we share 75% the same DNA as the nematode worm, C. elegans. We also share 50% the same DNA as banana trees. You see, so the fact that we have 90, 98%, depending on who you listen to, the same DNA as monkeys isn't a surprise. They look like us. Of course they have the same DNA. It doesn't mean we have a common ancestor. But don't forget, we creationists look at the similarities and the differences in the DNA, and we think that those similarities and differences have existed all the way from the beginning. The reason that some animals are more similar in their structure and DNA is because those body structures are coded by that DNA to do a similar job. However much different a horse's leg is from my forearm is to the extent of how different the function is. However similar the structure is and the DNA that codes for it is accountable for however similar the function is. And it's a little farther off. Horse's front leg is something like a human arm, but evolutionists will always point to that homology argument that we heard about a little bit earlier today also. Well, we see the differences as they've always been there. Evolutionists say, well, the only reason our DNA is different from monkeys, since we used to be the same thing with them, the only reason our DNA is different is from mutations. You see, they see all differences in all the DNA of all the different living things on Earth today, oak trees, mosquitoes and rattlesnakes and hawks and people. They see all the differences as having been caused by mutations. And since mutations happen, according to them, at a certain rate, that's an assumption, they don't really know. But they'll say, well, mutations happen at a certain frequency. And since it takes time for mutations, then the more mutations there are, the more time must have passed. So you see, if there's very few differences between the DNA of humans and chimps, then there must not have been very much time since the day when humans and chimps were the same thing. So to an evolutionist, the more differences means the more mutation. The more mutation means the more time has taken place since we evolved out of rats. You see, our DNA is very, very different from rats and dogs compared to monkeys, because it's been longer, you see, ago since we were the same thing as dogs were. Us and dogs did used to be the same thing according to evolution. Well, that's how they're doing this. That's how they're using mutation rates in the genome to time evolutionary events. It's based on a bunch of evolutionary assumptions. Whether they're true or not, they're using it as a genetic clock. Now, so that's how they've done this. You see, some of the DNA in monkeys is real similar to us, and some of it is really not very similar. That's where they're thinking, well, how could that be? Shouldn't all the DNA in the monkeys be like a little similar and a little different, not some of it way more different and some of it way not as different? You see, here's what could happen. Some of the genes got mix-mastered and got mixed together and shared 4 million years after the first split. So that DNA in the monkeys that looks way different from ours, that's the DNA from way back when we first split apart. The DNA in monkeys that looks really similar to us, that's the DNA that came from when our ancestors were mating with monkeys and mixed the genes around again, and we shared the same DNA for a little while, and then monkeys and humans again went their own separate ways, and we're the hybrid of that, basically sort of a bastardized genetic line. It's the best nice way to put it, I guess. Okay, so that explains what's going on with this and why they had to make this bodacious claim. Next. Look at what Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz says in Biological Theory magazine, it's a journal, just this year, in an article called Do Molecular Clocks Run It All? He's commenting on this very thing I've been discussing with you. Look at what he says. That struck me that this model of constant change was never challenged. If our molecules were constantly changing, and he means our DNA molecules, it would threaten proper survival. A genetically modified organism is not the product of gradual molecular change, but a sudden display. You see, he's creating a new theory, watch, a sudden display of genetic mutation which may have occurred myriad years prior. What Dr. Schwartz is suggesting is that mutations gather up in family lines and don't show. We're just carriers of them until all of a sudden in one generation all these traits come out in a sudden display. So like a lizard could lay an egg and a bird could hatch out. That would explain why there's no missing links. Now, back in the 1960s, an evolutionist named Richard B. Goldschmidt suggested the very same theory, and he called it the hopeful monster mechanism. And of course, evolutionists could not get a mechanism for this. He couldn't explain how this could possibly work or happen. Dr. Schwartz is trying to dig up old Dr. Goldschmidt's theory and now bring it to the rescue of evolution as it is dying today. Watch Dr. Schwartz and people like him. Watch these people as they're trying to say something else is happening. Hybridization must be doing it. Or a gathering up of mutations, not gradual change, not gradual slow change like Darwin said, but a sudden display. That kind of thing. And then hybridization happening. Those are the real mechanisms, not mutation and natural selection. Like Darwin said, you see, they're coming up with new ideas. Watch these people next. In this article in Newsweek magazine of just this year in March, the evolution revolution, the new science of brain and DNA, is rewriting the story of human origins. And I mentioned last night, if they've got to rewrite their story every time there's a new discovery of fact, that ought to tell you something about their story. Well, let's look at another aspect of what we looked at last night, again, in this admission by evolutionists in the major literature here. I'm going to zoom in on this part right here, again like we did last night, but I want to emphasize the DNA clock thing next. And it's going to be this part here. All right, there, the last creature ancestral to humans as well as chimps, our closest living cousins live, standing at a fork in the family tree as momentous as it is contentious. Fossils never resolved when the lineage is split. Fossils never showed when we split from the apes. They finally admit it, there's no missing links. Fossils never showed when we evolved from the monkeys. But DNA might! Okay, so now they've got a new hero. The DNA studies, all based on the assumptions I just explained to you. Human DNA and chimp DNA differ by no more than 1.2%, which I told you is logical even if evolution isn't real, which it isn't. And DNA changes at a fairly regular rate. There's the assumption. DNA changes at a fairly regular rate. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows. And it also causes some problems. Haldane's dilemma. They estimated it would take 1,667, they figured, mutations to change chimps into humans. Now they figured that out in the 1930s, and J.S. Haldane came up with this and said, well, guys, that would be, we haven't had enough time for 1,667 mutations to occur. Now we found out there's way more difference. There's millions of differences between our DNA and chimps. That lets, if DNA changes at a fairly regular rate, that lets scientists use this rate to calibrate a molecular clock. If it was true, yeah, it would, whose tick-tocks measure how long ago a genetic change occurred, if it was true. But watch, next. Dr. Milford Walpuff at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor said in 2004 in Science News magazine, those who use mitochondrial DNA to reconstruct animals' evolutionary histories assume that its chemical sequence changes only at random. But mounting evidence indicates that natural selection molds the makeup of mitochondrial DNA, making such analyses what? Useless. Useless. Watch the scientific community with me. You know, what Dr. Schwartz is saying, what Dr. Wolpoff is saying, what these new discoveries are coming up with, what the literature is saying, what the popular media is reporting to what's happening in the scientific world. A new paradigm, like the New York Times said in June, is coming in evolution. They might not even call it evolution, but it certainly won't be Darwin's theory. Darwin's not feeling very well. You see, next. In 1998, National Geographic reported on the Australopithecus africanus, that one that was after the Lucy fossil by 1 million years and yet was more chimpy than Lucy. And here's, not only did they say, well, evolution must have gone backwards, but they also said this, next. Here's a picture comparing the Lucy, this is a male Australopithecus afarensis, the Lucy species, and then 1 million years later came Australopithecus africanus, at least they say it was 1 million years, and notice the longer arms, the shorter legs. This is much more chimpy and ape-like, much, much less human-like, even though 1 million years of evolutionary progress has occurred. But look at one of the other explanations besides, well, maybe evolution went backwards. Here's the other one, next. Berger thinks that it's more likely, however, instead of evolution going backwards, that the two species evolved separately. The most probable idea is that afarensis and africanus, that's Lucy and the africanus, are sister species that share a missing link ancestor. And National Geographic goes on to say, if so, only one could have been ancestral to humans. Only one of them could actually be our ancestor then. Well, which one? You see, they lived, he's saying they must have lived at the same time. We just haven't found the fossils, you see, of them living at the same time. We found the africanus 1 million years higher in the rock layers, according to their way of dating rocks. Next. And here's where afarensis and africanus fit in. They are sister species, according to this researcher Berger. Neither of them are our ancestor, as far as I'm concerned. Certainly Lucy's having terrific problems. We were talking about that. And if they're sister species and one's not, then there's a very good chance the other one isn't either. Next. In March of 19th of this year, that Newsweek article that we showed you the cover of that just a little while ago says that the Homo erectus was not our ancestor. DNA makes it clear, that same DNA method that they love so much and they're married to it, they've got to go along with it because they already told us they think it's smart. So they can't back out now. It's made them say that humans and monkeys bred together. It's made them say that maybe hybridization is the way evolution worked. And now it's making them say that Homo erectus was almost certainly a dead end and not, as some scientists had argued, our ancestor. Homo erectus is now out of the family tree. Next. And here's that family tree we were talking about. Homo erectus fades from the family tree because of DNA evidence. And I showed you this yesterday. I'll run through it real quick with you. But all these other things in the family tree are running down, are falling out of the family tree too. Notice the little white squares are where they actually have fossil evidence. The dotted lines are their imaginations of how evolution might have proceeded from one of these to the other. Notice that Homo habilis in the middle there has a little line leading to a dead end of it, and it's never connected to any of the dotted lines leading to us in the upper right-hand corner, Homo sapiens. Notice that Lucy in the middle, lower middle, the Australopithecus afarensis, again, has all these dotted lines running all over. We do have the fossils. I think she was a chimp. The fossils lead to the africanus. But none of those dotted lines connect to a line that leads to us. That just shows she's not our ancestor. They can't even imagine. DNA knocks out the Homo erectus. Let's see how some of these other ones are knocked out of the running for being the missing link ancestor to us. Anatomy, either being more chimp-like or ape-like, knocks out Sahelanthropus chadensis, Australopithecus afarensis, many of the Paranthropus species, many of these other things that are at the ends of dead-end dotted lines are just too chimpy or too apey, and evolutionists themselves have said they're not our ancestor. Next. Also, what if it comes in the wrong place in the fossils? The Homo habilis seems to be existing at the same time as Homo erectus and now therefore can't be the one that evolved into Homo erectus. Africanus can't be the one that Lucy evolved into because it's more primitive and it's 1 million years later. Just the whole story gets messed up. Next. Well, how about things that are the same as another one that's eliminated? Homo ergaster can't be our ancestor because they've decided it's the same thing as Homo erectus, and that's been eliminated by the DNA. Aurorantuganensis, Ardipithecus ramidus, and Ardipithecus cadava can't be our ancestor because they're supposed to be the same genus as Sahelanthropus chadensis. So that can't be our ancestor. Well, next. How about ones that are actually humans? We're not sure about the hobbit fossil. Some people think it's a human. We know Neanderthals were actually people. The new name is Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, and we are Homo sapiens sapiens. So that's knocked out. Also, Cro-Magnon isn't even on the chart, and neither is Homo rudolfensis. I'm not sure why they didn't put Homo rudolfensis. Kenyanthropus rudolfensis is there. I know that Cro-Magnon is now considered human. Neanderthals are considered human. I think that Homo rudolfensis is probably considered human also. I'm not sure about that one, though, but it isn't even on the chart anymore. Next. Look what the New York Times, that same article I referenced a little earlier, says. The human family tree has become a bush with many branches. Instead of a ladder, a straight line of descendants, like your great-great-grandfather, your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, and you, it's this bushy, problematic picture that you just saw from just this year in 2007. And here in June of 2007, the New York Times is just saying, well, it's really getting more complicated. And when you are believing a lie, or even trying to convince people of a lie, it really does get complicated. Next. Again, I want to remind you what Donald Johanson, the Lucy discoverer, says: nobody really places a great deal of faith in any human phylogenetic tree. I think that's pretty certain today also, even with the most up-to-date tree they've been able to produce. Next. Now, it's not just with human evolution. Look at what happened just this July of 2007. They found in the same layer dinosaurs and the little reptiles that dinosaurs were supposed to have evolved from. Again, this is like finding out that your great-grandmother and your grandmother were sisters and not indeed one coming before the other. This is a problem. Look at this. It says here, and this is a quote from the San Francisco Chronicle. Until now, many scientists have argued that the early close relatives of dinosaurs must have disappeared abruptly in an early mass extinction. I'll call that Noah's flood. Okay, about 215 million years ago, which I'll call 4,356 years ago. That was never clearly explained. Well, it was explained when Moses wrote it down. Okay, these problems, people say we don't have any answers. This is one reason why they hate the Bible. Modern relativism and postmodernism claims there are no absolutes, there are no answers, conclusions are evil, and this book is just filled with answers. They don't like that. This book even tells you which came first, the chicken or the egg. Yes, it does. Which came first? The chicken. See how simple? Okay. Next. I wrote a post about this little finding, and this is, by the way, and if you want to get on my email list, there it is. Just go to the website and sign up on the ordering page. It's free. I got almost 3,000 people on my email list, www.pointsoforigins.com. Now, and both of them are plural, or else you go to an acupuncture website or a travel agency. Okay, so get the two S's in there. Now, I reported on this. There's that quote we just read, but here's what I said about it. Now, why find dino missing link fossils with dinos? Same as the two supposed human links in the same rock that we found this August of 2007. Same because they were all created on day 6 and they lived at the same time. No wonder they're in the same rock. And I give the reference. I always reference things. You don't have to believe anything I say. You can look it up yourself. You can read the same thing I read. New findings show that the disappearance of what Berkeley paleontologist Kevin Padian calls the dino wannabes was a long, very slow process. How can Padian, Hate Creation Group National Science Center for Science Education Incorporated president, he's the president of Eugenie Scott's organization, how can he explain this? Well, Padian and his colleagues will not say that his wannabes are direct ancestors of the dinosaurs, but the Virginia Museum of Natural History says those guys are surely on their way to being dinosaurs. San Francisco Chronicle. By the way, when it's in red, it's when an evolutionary source is speaking, and so that's what I color code it for. Well, if they're surely on their way, wouldn't they be before the dinosaurs? Wouldn't they be before and not with them? The entire area around the site is where other scientists have found dinosaurs and their precursor relatives in different layers too, but never so abundantly and so clearly side by side as in this new fossil find. What would Darwin do? WWDD. Okay, what would Darwin do? These questions will continue to puzzle the team during next year's dig and for many years to come. Well, that's just too bad. And I always like to end my post, you keep thinking, keep thinking, keep thinking. You see, you're allowed to think and be a Christian. A lot of people think you got to, be dead from the neck up to be a Christian, to be a Bible believer. Do you realize that our faith is the only one that commands you to question? Commands you to question. In other religions, it's a sin to question your faith. What does the Bible say? Test me, try me, prove me, taste and see if the Lord is not good. See if I will not bless you, shaken down and pressed together, a good measure overflowing. God's not scared of questions. He can take it. The truth can take examination. I'm not talking about questions that are designed to destroy knowledge, like that foolish question. If God has all power, then does he have enough power to create a rock so large that he cannot lift it? And the atheist thinks they've got you there. You know what this reflects? An inability to comprehend infinity. You see, no human can comprehend infinity. And so we must not lay this finite box on top of God, because it's just not true. Measuring the quantity of energy and the size of things God can create is irrelevant to an infinite being. It does not apply. It's like asking you, sir, if your girdle fits well, or I don't know. It doesn't apply to you. I mean, unless you're really disguised well, okay? It just doesn't apply. And so applying finite thinking to an eternal, infinite God doesn't work. The question is flawed. Or like, where did Cain get his wife? Or what about the second creation story in the Bible? Just look at these kinds of things. We're allowed to question. Read, study to see if these things be so. Be like the Bereans and study. Look and see. Oh, there's so many flaws in the Bible, so many contradictions. Oh, really? Oh, yes. Well, lots of them? Yeah, so many. Do you know any of them? Oh, I have lots. I know lots of them. Yeah. Well, give me one. Give me one. And I go, oh, well, there's so I can't pick. Oh, go ahead. Don't pick the best one. Just give me one. The one that comes off the top of your head. And it'll be something just so lame-o. Because there aren't contradictions in the Bible, you see. That's the problem they have. Okay, I'm sorry. I preached a little. Ron warned you I preach sometimes. Okay, next. And here's their story, and they're sticking to it. Their bacteria turned into fish, turned into amphibians, to reptiles, to mammals, to cavemen, and then to us. That's the evolution story in a cartoon. Next. Now here's what Roger Lewin said in Science magazine in 1982. I'm going to wrap this up with the frustrations they're having, the jig is up guys feeling that they're getting, and then what I think they're going to do about it, and who they're going to tap, and who's going to rise up and save evolution this time. Roger Lewin said, natural selection can weed out some of the complexity and slow down some of the information decay that results in speciation somehow. It may have a stabilizing effect, but it does not promote speciation, or the origin of new species. It is not a creative force, as many people have suggested. You see, a lot of people think that, natural selection is some kind of magic wand. A lizard needs to evolve wings and feathers and turn into a bird and fly, so evolution just magics it up. Natural selection can't make anything. All it can do is select from what's already there. Next. Here's something very interesting. This is showing the frequency of mutations. This is showing how extreme a mutation is. If it's so good that it gives a species an advantage, then it's kept. If it's so bad that it gives a species a disadvantage, then it's lost by that animal dying, and the other one is kept by that animal surviving better and having more offspring because it's superior, the fittest. Well, this zone here is the zone of mutations that make such a slight difference that they don't matter. Look what it says in the caption. I cannot draw this part of the mutation distribution small enough So a relatively large triangle is shown instead. That's the one he's talking about, the good mutations, the positive mutations. Even with beneficial mutations greatly exaggerated, it becomes obvious that essentially all beneficial mutations will fall within Kimura's no selection zone. Well, if they fall in the no selection zone, then how can natural selection select them to be kept? They'll be lost through genetic drift then. This completed picture, which is correct, makes progressive evolution on the genomic level virtually impossible. Now, this is known data, observed things. Even harmful mutations mostly fall within the no selection zone. They're not bad enough that the thing dies. Either that or it kills it right away. And who wrote this? This is from a book written by John Sanford, a professor emeritus at Cornell University. Dr. Sanford is a leading researcher in genetics of plants. He invented the gene gun. How many have ever heard of the gene gun? Okay, well, it's specially used in genetic engineering in plants. Dr. Sanford, now that he's an emeritus professor and he's gone through the tenure process and all, now he can say what he thinks and come out as a creationist. And he's published this book called The Mystery of the Genome. I think it's Genetic Meltdown and the Mystery of the Genome, and you can find that on the website at Answers in Genesis. And this is the main finding, one of the main findings in his book, that mutations can't make evolution happen. But he's not alone, even among evolutionists, in thinking this. Next. But first I wanted to point this out. Scott Todd, a professor at Kansas State University in 1999, said in Nature magazine, the premier journal of science in the world, said this: even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, who's the intelligent designer? God. Even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not naturalistic. Even if all the data points to God, I won't believe because it's supernatural, not natural. Well, what if the supernatural stuff is actually real? Then God's a fact of the universe, and you're a fool for not allowing him into the equation. That's not science. That's not logic. It's not good thinking. It's certainly not good theology. Next. Well, here's Dr. Schwartz again, and he's pointing out this in 2007. The history of organic life is undemonstrable. We cannot prove a whole lot in evolutionary biology, and our findings will always be an educated guess, a hypothesis, an educated guess. There is one true evolutionary history of life, and whether we will actually ever know it is not likely. Most importantly, we have to think about questioning underlying assumptions. Dr. Schwartz is trying to save evolution. He says, let's question these assumptions we've always had about molecular changes in the DNA happening gradually, and about maybe hybrids are part of it. Maybe it's not just slow and gradual stuff like Darwin said. We got to question these assumptions, whether we're dealing with molecules of DNA or anything else. Next. This man here is Dr. Stephen Wolfram. I think he got his doctoral degree at about 17 years old in the 1970s, late 70s, early 80s. Then he invented the Mathematica software and became one of those super rich computer geek guys. Then Dr. Wolfram, who isn't a young man anymore necessarily, has hid in his townhouse for 20 years and wrote this book, which the entire scientific world waited with bated breath to hear what the boy genius would say. In his book, A New Kind of Science, he found and researched and looked and observed, as any scientist ought to, that there are patterns in nature, not just in the living world, but in the non-living world too. You've seen those crisscross patterns on the back of a rattlesnake or other animals. And you may have also been standing at the beach and watched as a wave washed back out into the ocean, and in the little rivulets in the sand, the heavier grains of sand that contain the black biotype mica, the black mica, actually get down into those rivulets, and they make that same crisscross. How many have ever seen that? Same little black sand crisscross pattern when a wave is rushing back out. Pretty fast. Fast-moving water always makes that kind of pattern. Wolfram says in the living world and the non-living world, these patterns are replete. They're everywhere. The pattern that you see even in the bracts, in the flower bud, follow the Fibonacci series, or the golden ratio. just like the nautilus shell, the snail shell. He says that all of nature is unfolding to just a few very, very simple mathematical equations, which he calls cellular automatons. And he programmed these into a computer and got some really interesting results. Now, I wondered in the year 2000, when we all knew he was coming out with this book in 2002, I wondered what the evolutionists would do with this. In 2000, already 40,000 copies of his book had sold before it was even printed. Everyone wanted to know what Wolfram was going to say. Well, when he came out with this theory, I wonder if the evolutionist is going to say, well, you see, creationists, we don't need God. The Big Bang, the universe created these mathematical equations. Or were they going to say, uh-oh, this is bad. Mathematical equations must be written by a mathematician, so we'll just reject Wolfram's idea because that insinuates there's a God. So, yeah, I didn't know what they were going to do. What happened when Wolfram's book came out in 2002? Nothing. They just poo-pooed the whole thing and went, oh, well, what's next? Now, I predict they're going to pick up Wolfram, because now they need him. They need Schwartz. They need Volpov. They need guys like Wolfram and new ideas, something fresh, other than the stale old Darwin idea that's dying on the vine right now as we speak. Watch for what happens with A and KOS. That's what they call the book for short of New Kind of Science. Next. Also, this evolutionist, who's the one who bailed out evolution back in the 1970s with her theory that mitochondria and chloroplasts and other little parts, inner working parts, organelles inside of every living cell really used to be bacteria that got into bigger cells. And evolutionists were happy for her theory because it explained the big jump from bacteria to normal cells. See, a bacteria doesn't have a nucleus in itself where all the DNA is. It's so much more simple. There's a huge jump. The biggest missing link in evolution, except for chemicals to living things. The second biggest link in evolution that's missing is the jump from prokaryotes to eukaryotes, in other words, from bacteria to normal cells. And Margulis said bacteria got into bigger cells and made the nucleus, made the centrioles and the mitochondria and the chloroplasts and the Golgi apparatus and stuff like that. And that was her theory. How this was going to happen, you don't know. She said, I heard her speak at University of Cincinnati, not far from here, on March 1st of this year. And she said that this, I asked her personally, I said, well, how could this happen? She said, well, it was ingestion without digestion, without destruction. Well, you know, how could a cell eat the bacteria and not kill it? Well, it ate it, swallowed it, and it got in there and just stayed as a symbiont, as something that helped it. Interesting theory, no mechanism for really how it could really happen, but it saved the evolutionists. But she took her theory further than the evolutionists wanted her to. And today, she's in real trouble for it. Her theory is, her symbiogenesis, she said all living organisms are the product of my theory of symbiogenesis, the inherited acquired genomes. It only looks like punctuated equilibrium, like Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge observed when they observed things in 1970s and saved evolution from a missing link problem by saying evolution proceeds in fits and starts. She said it only looks like punctuated equilibrium. Really, it's symbiogenesis. Basically, she says that bacteria all around the world put their DNA together and kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it, and that's how we got human beings. Okay, that's how we got giraffes and eagles and whales and T-Rexes. Now, I'm not really ridiculing her theory. It makes as good a sense as evolution does, and she's got a very logical mind. The lady here is a member of the National Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Russian Academy of Sciences. She co-authored the Gaia hypothesis with James Lovelock in 1975, who was a British scientist, and the Gaia hypothesis is in my field of environmental biology. But I asked her, you're saying these things. I did get a chance to talk to her in person. Gradual accumulation of mutations is never the way eukaryotes evolve. Eukaryotes is everything but bacteria, okay? Never the way that animals and plants evolve. That's going against what Darwin said. Random mutation is a minor effect, she says. Well, I asked her, what in the world, what are your colleagues saying to you about this? And she said, well, they've cut my funding. NASA has cut her research funding for her origin of life and her evolution of life theories. She stood up in front of the audience at the University of Cincinnati and she said, Is anyone here a millionaire? You know, does anyone want to fund my research? She was mad because she'd recently heard the news she was being dropped from the funding. Now, she still is a tenured professor at University of Massachusetts Amherst. But watch Lynn Margulis to be called upon by the evolutionist community to come in. Now they're going to need her. Now they're going to need her and her theories. They're going to need Wolfram and his theories. Something about hybridization. Something about bacteria putting their brains together and making humans. Something about mutations, yeah, occurring, but then they just all kind of gather up and then all together as a group express themselves in evolution that proceeds in fits and starts, leaving no fossils of missing links because they never existed. Watch what they're going to do. Dr. David Minton said to me, watch for the evolutionists to become more New Agey and superstitious and supernatural in their orientation. Watch for them to start believing in these philosophical statements, no longer resorting to science at all, but resorting to statements of pure philosophy and almost an eschatology. So sort of worshiping nature. Mother Nature is doing it. They're the ones that are living in la-la land, not us. They're the ones whose ideas that they've cherished for generations, 150 years, are collapsing like a house of cards right in front of their eyes to their own dismay. Look, these people are fighting for their lives. Tenure, reputation, funding, endowed chairmanships, everything. The entire theory they base their whole life's work on, and even the way they live their lives, the philosophies of atheism and naturalism, is all at stake if this stuff isn't true. They're fighting for their religion. Next. So watch these people. Stephen Wolfram, I'd say, watch him. Watch Lynn Margulis, Milford Waltham, and the likes of him. Roger Lewin, although I did mention he was from the past there. And also Jeffrey Schwartz. I think Jeffrey Beta from Scripps Oceanographic Institute is important to keep an eye on. The research of Mary H. Schweitzer, the one that found the T-Rex vein that was real soft tissue, and many researchers like that. The new findings that are coming up all of the time about these hybrids and about fossils being found in the wrong place for their story to be true, it's all coming down, and they're going to have to come up with a new theory. Next. And I think that might actually, yes, that was the end of what I had. Now, by the way, if you're interested in looking at it, I do have the copy, the paper copy here of that issue of the New York Times, the science section on evolution from June 26th of this year. If you'd like to just browse through it, I still need to finish using it for my presentations, but I hope I've been able to give you some sort of an idea of what may or may not be happening. Like I can't promise that all my guesses are true, but I can promise that the stuff I've reported to you tonight is true. These are the things they're saying.